Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of High Energy Girl. And today's amazing guest is Mindy Gorman-Plutzer, who is the owner and creator of The Freedom Promise, a functional nutrition and eating psychology coaching practice dedicated to guiding you on the most valuable journey of your life, the one where you get to realize and reclaim the most vibrant version of yourself. She's an expert in helping people conquer their eating disorders. So let's go and say hello to Mindy. Hey everyone, welcome to High Energy Girl, a podcast helping women to age stronger because it is never too late to get fit, be strong, and feel sexy. I'm your host, Tracy Gluhige, health coach and personal trainer and founder of highenergygirl.com. Each week, we will either have a guest interview, which will provide you encouragement or an actionable tip to help you age stronger, or I will do a solo episode. Please also join our awesome Facebook group called High Energy Girls, and I'm looking forward to see you on the inside of that group and hope you enjoy today's show. Hey everyone, this is Tracy, and I have a special announcement. In order for me to help more women age stronger, I have created a 90-day one-on-one coaching program. And the goal here is to teach women over 50 how to age stronger while burning fat and boosting energy without going hungry or living in the gym. If you'd like more information, please hit me up at tracy@highenergygirl.com or friend me on Facebook and send me a message. I have a goal of transforming 1,000 women in the next year, and I hope you are one of them. Hey, Mindy, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
So happy to be here, Tracy. Thank you.
Oh, you're a doll. I'm happy to meet you. Hey, so for the listeners that don't know you yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Mindy Gorman-Plutzer. I have a private practice. I'm here in New York, but I work virtually, actually all over the world. Grateful to say that. My practice is based on functional medicine and eating psychology coaching. And I work primarily with women, midlife women, who have eating challenges. They might have struggled with eating disorders early in their lives and they're resurfacing, or they have eating challenges that have just carried through the decades of their lives, and they realize that it's finally time to stop worrying about their weight and the size of their thighs and really embrace all that life has for them now.
Awesome. That's beautiful. Well, what brought you to that point? Like, let's go back in time here. And what brought you to this work that you clearly are passionate about?
Well, I laugh because it's all about story, right? And being that I'm 66 years old, I've got quite a story. I'll try and give you the cliff notes. My experience with disordered eating started at a very early age. And I just want to fast forward for a second and say that what brought me to this work is my experience with recovery and the ability I found to embrace it and, of course, to pay it forward. So I want to say that I started dieting. I learned to diet at a very early age. I grew up in a loving home, but it was complicated. It was very Ozzie and Harriet-ish. And the messages that I received were really all about the value of beauty, the value of what other people thought of you, the value of secrets. Not everybody should know your truth. The truth really doesn't matter. What matters is what people see. And I have to say that I was born to parents that were mere children themselves, and their coping skills really weren't highly honed. So that really took its toll on me. So I learned at a very early age to walk on eggshells, to keep quiet, be a good girl, follow the rules, and not ask for much, which morphed into my life as a message that my needs didn't matter. And that morphed into the belief that I didn't really have needs. So put that in one container. The other container was all about my relationship with food, which morphed out of my parents' issues with their weight and their body, the fact that dieting became a family activity. We did the Atkins diet, the Stillman diet, the cabbage soup diet. Of course, there was calorie counting and calorie restricting. So as I said, that was another container, but putting that together with my need for approval, my need to belong, my need to feel safe, my need not to rock the boat, I became the perfect dieter. So now fast forward to my 20s. I married quite young, married at 21, had my first daughter at 22, my second daughter at 24. By the time I was in my early 30s, my husband and I were very active in our community. Our girls were growing up beautifully, but I still was carrying the weight, if you will, of needing to be something, needing to figure out how to be, never really learning who to be. By the time I was in my late 30s, my disordered behaviors had really hit an all-time bottom. I like to say that I was totally spent emotionally, physically, and spiritually. There was the reliance on over-the-counter appetite suppressants, laxatives, diuretics. Was never happy with anything other than what the scale told me to be happy with, which was so sad because I had this beautiful life that I really wasn't able to fully grasp hold of. And I sought help. I went to the family doctor. I was put on a regimen of weekly weigh-ins, twice weekly therapy sessions, meetings with a dietitian who had me on a meal plan that was totally unsustainable for me. They put me on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. And I went along this way. I was doing recovery really, really well, showing up for my appointments, following the meal plan to the best of my ability, going to the therapist, learning what I was supposed to be thinking. So it became a story of what I needed to weigh, what I needed to think, and what I needed to eat. No one was really talking to me about what I was really hungry for, to feel safe, to feel like I belonged, how I was sourcing my self-worth. And it became more of an issue for me. So now I'm in my mid-40s doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. And my husband of almost 28 years was diagnosed with metastatic melanoma. And the prognosis was never good. So we spent 21 long months fighting that battle. Lost my husband in August of 2004. And all of the tools went out the window. And I retreated back into my very disordered and dysfunctional thinking and behaviors. And I was plodding along and I was really scraping the bottom. And I certainly was not the mother that my now grown up daughters who were magnificent women deserved. Nor was I the woman I deserved to be. So I set on a mission of self-discovery. And that took me at 50 years old to become a board certified health coach, a certified eating psychology coach. And that led me on the path to discover functional medicine nutrition. And with all that training and all the motivation and the inspiration of the possibilities, I put together a program that is now the Freedom Promise.
Wow. Wow. That's a remarkable story. I am so a little overcome with emotion about that. So bless your heart.
Thank you.
So what is the Freedom Promise?
The Freedom Promise is morphed out of, as I said, my recovery. And freedom is an acronym for my signature framework. And so it's about 7 steps to stop fearing what food will do to you, because that's how I spent decades of my life, fearing what food would do to me, and start embracing what it can do for you. And that's what my experience of recovery taught me. So the first step in this acronym for freedom is find your enough. Face your feelings and feel the love. And finding your enough really speaks to how you source your self-worth. Are you the kind of woman who gives yourself to everybody? Put yourself last. And that's so common, especially among women in my generation, where we, raised our children. Perhaps now we're taking care of aging loved ones, whether it be spouse, friends, or parents, and we put ourselves last. And this woman usually doesn't eat all day. And when she finally sits down to eat at the end of the day, either out of stress or exhaustion, she might find herself devouring bags or boxes of whatever her comfort food go-to form of self-soothing is. Then there's the superwoman, the woman who sources her self-worth from her material success. And that woman might look at the fact that she needs to be good all day, or maybe is so involved in putting herself out there that, again, she forgets about that connection to herself and the connection to the wisdom of her body. That woman could be what I like to call a professional dieter. That woman could be somebody who struggles with disordered eating, which I believe is nothing more than misguided behavior that is driven by misguided beliefs. And we can talk more about that later. Or maybe a woman is sourcing her self-worth from how she looks. Is she worried about image? Is she spending all her time and energy, like I did, being guided by the number on the scale? And I always said by the size of my thighs. So that woman is going to be restricting all day and restricting until she just can't take it anymore, and might very well lose herself to a binge or lose herself to such severe restriction that she becomes so severely malnourished that she can't even think straight. So that's finding your enough. That's how we start to find your enough. Face your feelings. Well, we're human beings. We are supposed to feel. We're supposed to express our needs. Feelings are supposed to be expressed. When we can't express our feelings very often, we turn to a relationship with food in order to express that for us. Starvation is basically a repudiation of needs, and overeating is metaphoric for fearing not having enough for whatever reason. So much of this depends on story. And then, of course, feel the love. That's all about gratitude. It's all about gratitude. Are you living in a mindset of abundance or one of scarcity? Mm-hmm. Second step is rest and digest. It talks about the science of stress and how stress greatly impacts our not our physiology, but our psychology, and how psychology impacts our physiology. And I go into detail there. Step 3, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're not. I talk about the difference between true physical hunger and mind-body hunger, emotional hunger. There's so much out there today about emotional eating, but I think there are 3 kinds of emotional eating. There's the way we eat with joy, the way a meal that maybe a beloved grandmother or a holiday tradition, those feelings elicited from those memories. That's emotional. We want to bring emotion to the table with us when we're sitting down to a meal. Who hasn't had that extra piece of deliciousness just because at the end of a meal? The healthiest eaters on earth do that. Then there's emotional eating where we eat so as not to feel emotion, when we eat in an effort to numb, avoid, distract feelings or situations that we deem intolerable. And then there's the eating to express emotion, right? Are we angry? Do we need to crunch? Are we seeking comfort? So we need creamy, silky kind of foods. Or are we feeling empty? So we need heavier foods like pastas, pizza, bagels. Step 4, eat mindfully, bringing mindfulness to the table. Now I realize that not everybody has the time to luxuriate over every meal, but even thoughts, negative thoughts, distracting thoughts like, why am I eating this? You shouldn't be eating this. You hate the way you look. Why are you doing this? Or so-and-so told me that I should be eating that way. That impedes digestion. So even negative thoughts send negative messages to the body. So it's really important to be present, experience the meal. Even if you don't have time, take the time to really chew your food well. Pay attention to the texture, the taste, the temperature, and then you can move on to the next task. D is do something every day to make your body feel alive. And this speaks to not only body image, but how we honor our bodies, how we should honor our bodies with movement rather than punishing them in the gym with exercise that's designed to make them go away. Only eat whole foods as often as you can. So that's the nutrition piece. And I always like to point out that a relationship to food, behavior with food, encompasses so much more than what you're eating. It's about what your body is doing with what you're eating. That's the functional medicine way. But it's how you're eating and why you're eating. So all of these other steps really envelop the nutrition piece of this. And it's funny because, and I'm digressing a little bit, but these steps really happened organically. And just the way the only eat whole foods as often as you can, have this nutrition 101 piece is almost at the end, I find to be fascinating. So only eat whole foods as often as you can. So I give lessons on, of course, macronutrients, the protein, fats, and carbohydrates, the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals, but also the energetics of food and how food impacts mood. Of course, then there's gut health, right? The gut-brain connection, which is all over blogs today and social media and is becoming really mainstream when it comes to healthcare. The gut sends more messages to the brain than the brain sends to the gut. And what's important for our listeners to note is that when we're born in vitro, an embryo, the gut and the brain are formed from the same tissue.
Oh, I didn't know
That's
that.
why they're so interconnected. I just learned this myself. And when you think about the images of the gut with all those squiggly lines, and then think about the image of the brain, how similar they look.
Oh, yeah, that's so true.
Right? So what we're eating has such a strong impact on how we're thinking and how we're feeling. And then, besides vitamins and minerals, there are also chemical compounds in the food that affect the neurotransmitters, our brain chemistry. So that's really, really vitally important to understand when you're looking to reframe how you think about food and what your body is doing with it. And then finally, the final step is make sure you surround yourself with what truly nourishes. Because what truly nourishes us, our relationships, our purpose, our spirituality, is not found in the kitchen, nor is it found in the pantry or the freezer or the cupboard or the big box stores. And those are the 7 steps.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what percentage of women do you think are affected by disordered eating of one form or another?
Tracy, I can't give you a percentage, but I can tell you that the number is in the millions. And it's a common thought, a common belief that it's adolescent girls that are affected by eating disorders, but that's not the case. Eating disorders in midlife, women and men actually are on the rise. The numbers of people who are playing out their stress, the uncertainty in the world with their relationship with food is exponential.
Yeah. Especially probably the last 2 years. It's probably gotten a lot worse.
No question. No question. There are so many triggers when you think about it, especially as we get older. So life happenstance, and we've certainly been thrown into that. And everything that could happen in one's life has been magnified because of the intensity of our isolation and seclusion, the frustration of not being able to take care of a loved one, the frustration of not being able to visit someone in the hospital if need be. And as women in midlife, this is what is before us. Even something as simple and as joyous as not being able to go visit a new grandchild in the hospital, not being able to be with your child when she's giving birth.
Mm-hmm.
That can trigger a need to self-soothe, certainly. And for many people, the need to self-soothe is about food. And there's a reason for that. The reason being that our very first experience with self-soothing, with being seen, with being heard, with being nurtured, had to do with being fed. It's the very first thing we experience after birth. Right? The brain remembers this. Need, eat, feel better. Now, very often when we gain a sense of autonomy and ego, and life might not be as safe, and we might not feel as secure as we need to, the brain remembers need, eat, feel better. So that's why for many people, the need to self-soothe becomes acting out with food.
So why do you think, I'm just thinking of clients, okay?
Sure.
So why do you think that a woman would self-sabotage knowing that she's going to feel like shit afterwards, knowing that it's the pleasure lasts but a moment, but the self-inflicted pain, beating herself up afterwards lasts a lot longer? Why do you think they would choose to, like, say, binge on a bag of chips or something?
Because for most women who are in that situation, they're not thinking about the end result. The pain, the discomfort is so great that that's calling to be put out, if you will. The fire is burning so strong that it needs to be put out. And many women feel they'll deal with it later. Tomorrow is going to be different. What has
Yeah, I had
Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say what needs to happen is they need to feel empowered enough to put a pause in place, right? The excuse, the rationale is merely a challenge that they're giving their power up to. So it's working with somebody, a coach, a mentor, that can help them realize that they can be empowered, that their behavior is disempowering. But they have to also realize, Tracy, the context within which the behavior evolved in the first place. And that's why so much of the work needs to be around story. Who they are as eaters, as I like to say, right? What were the triggering factors? What set them up for this? There's a wonderful researcher. Her name is Cynthia Bullock. She works out of the University of North Carolina. And she says that genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger. And that's because 60 to 85% of eating disorders are rooted in genetics.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
If you think about it, if you work with women who are struggling with any form of disordered eating behaviors, and you go back into their history, it's very rare that someone won't tell you, oh, gee, my grandmother had these funny food rules, or my grandmother didn't eat all day, or my mother struggled with her weight. My mother was always on a diet. My mother was always talking about her body.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. My parents were always on a diet, but I remember when they were on Atkins, I loved it because they'd make these big old salad bar things. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, but to that point, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I must put out the caveat that not everybody who goes on a diet is going to develop an eating disorder or a form of disordered eating. But I have not worked with one person whose eating disorder or disordered behavior with food did not start with a diet. So it's that predisposition. And there are so many biological triggers that we're discovering. Hunger hormones can be dysregulated, blood sugar dysregulations, so many different issues that could come into play that could trigger an eating disorder. Digestive dysregulation, dysbiosis can trigger disordered eating. And then there's another factor, chronic disease. Somebody who is struggling with disease and discomfort for so long that they become afraid of what to eat.
Like maybe their body reacts to certain foods or something like that?
Well, I'll give you an example, because I've worked with many women with this issue. They've been put on a autoimmune protocol, particularly, an AIP diet, autoimmune paleo protocol, and really removed a lot of foods from their intake, from their diet. And now it's time to put food back. And they're petrified of what these foods are going to do to them. And without the right guidance and the right mentoring and the right coaching, these foods aren't reintroduced properly. And very often these women need hand holding. So, I often say that disordered eating could be a result of or a contributing factor.
Okay. And what do you feel like is the most common? Like, what do you see in your practice as the most common thread among women? Like, you've said a lot about not eating all day. Do you find that that's the issue, or do you find it's overeating, or what do you see?
Yeah, I find in my practice, the most common issue is overeating, binge eating. And the definition of that is eating beyond being comfortably full, eating in an effort to numb, avoid, distract. Women they'll be motivated to seek my services for weight loss, that their behavior with food has just gotten out of hand. They feel out of control. Now, many of those women are restricting all day. It's part of that diet mentality, eat less, exercise more, which frankly is old science. Or eat this, don't eat that. And they're finding that whatever diet fad they're following is just not working for them. So what happens at the end of the day, they're exhausted, or they're in the habit of just collapsing in front of the TV. And the next thing they know, they've devoured either a bag of chips, a bag of nuts, or a container of ice cream, and very often it's washed down with a bottle of wine. So that's what I'm seeing a lot of these days. It's a combination of not eating enough, leading to feeling of deprivation. Who's not feeling deprived these days, and therefore not allowing themselves to feel deprived from food.
Yeah. I like to think about, instead of depriving our body of food, but feeding your cells like the nutrients they need so that when they renew and divide, they're healthy and like aging stronger. So feeding your muscles so that they can grow and you can be stronger instead of weaker, you know?
That's what we would hope, but so many women fear what food will do to them because they're only thinking of food in terms of how it's going to manifest related to weight.
So they're just still addicted to the scale. I wrote a book a few years ago called No Frickin' Way, WEIGH. Because I used to be addicted to the scale. Now I like hardly never weigh myself and my weight always stays about the same. So, but yeah, I used to do that. I used to weigh myself several times a day. So I get that. But it's like, why do we tend to give our power away to an inanimate object? Why do we as women allow that scale? Like it's all cool, I can use in yogurt, or if it's on the upside, oh shit, I gotta starve away. You know?
Yeah, because we are, as a culture, disconnected from the wisdom of our bodies. We don't listen. We don't realize that the symptoms we're feeling are messages calling for our attention. We don't honor that our bodies are exquisite, extraordinary beings capable of so much. And again, it's going to go back to how we source our self-worth. If we're sourcing our self-worth from something outside of ourselves, then it makes sense that we're going to find value in something outside of ourselves, whether it be a scale, a car, a home, a watch, a diet, anything but what's really going on here.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You know, I've had some experience with 12-step programs. And the biggest problem I had with it was the idea that I was powerless over anything and that I was going to remain forever sick and suffering, and that I had to give myself up to something greater outside of myself, when having spent decades of my life giving up myself to something outside of myself was my demise.
Well said.
So what I discovered was that my highest power is really my deepest sense of self. And when I connect to that part of me, which is like my soul, my gut, my visceral self, there's no fear. There's only joy. There's only blue skies. There's only love. And I am one with the universe. To render myself powerless and to think of myself as always in a state of recovery, always recovering rather than being recovered, I'm totally demoralized. When I'm making choices for myself, whether I'm choosing to or not to eat something because it will benefit me the most, I'm fully empowered. Which is why I have so much trouble with the traditional eating disorder recovery model of all foods fit. Because somebody who has been struggling with eating challenges for years, like I did, who had episodes of binging and purging, whether it be laxative abuse or vomiting or even over-exercising, periods of severe restricting, the gut microbiome is really in a deficient state. the imbalance of beneficial and non-beneficial bacteria is really messed up. How could the body respond well to eating everything? It can't. It has to be extremely bio-individual. So when a patient in a residential facility or an intensive outpatient facility who is eating group meals and it's part of their therapy is told that they need to eat whatever is served to them in order to fully commit to their recovery, and then they complain about digestive upset, it's looked at as a psychological issue rather than what's really going on in there, that there could be something physiological going on.
Wow.
Now I want to just say that, yeah, there could be some fear involved of being asked to eat something that you're just not used to eating. But the body needs time to adjust. And we need to look at that balance of bacteria. Is there an overgrowth of unhealthy bacteria in there? Is there yeast? Or is there a motility issue? Is the food just sitting there because of a lack of digestive enzymes or maybe stomach acid? So these are all real issues that have to be addressed. Recovery is extremely nuanced. It's not about weight. It's not about food groups. It's not about putting weight on or taking weight off. So again, it really speaks to who we are as eaters. And we need to look at why we're eating, how we're eating. And when we examine all of that, the what seems to take care of itself.
Wow. And I love how you said that, because our physiology is all different, right? So we can't serve a meal to girl A and expect girl B to be able to eat the same thing. And I'm sure in those types of places, they're not feeding them quality food.
No.
I mean, I used to think quality food was anything, low cal or whatever, but now it's like, it's quality, like hormone free, pesticide free, things that are going to really truly feed your cells. So that's a really good point. And it could be like the lack of digestive enzymes or stomach acid. So they're getting, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. And so many of us, and I say that collectively, we're bombarded with products that are disguised as food. I tell people, eat food, not products. Right? When clients ask me about reading labels, I said, let's make it a goal to eat as little as you can that even has a label.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the pandemic here, I was in New York City, where was the epicenter, right? Everything was closed. And the only time I went out was to go food shopping. That was the activity. And the shelves were bare. And even the frozen food sections were bare. But you could get plenty of fruits and vegetables. That's what we should be eating all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. I'm lucky. I live on a farm. We have a big old garden. So my husband's like, oh, look at the broccoli. And, so we can just go pick, our stuff. But you said something that I really want to go back to. You were talking about your inner being, your inner self, and how you don't need to be run by something on the outside of you. It's all within. Can you talk more about that and maybe what your daily practices are to listen to your inner wisdom, or just to connect with yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've spent a lot of time quieting the noise in my head, number one. And I listen to the noise in my body. I also begin and end every day journaling. I start in the morning by journaling about what my intention is for the day. How can I be of service to others, and how can I be of service to myself? And that can take me anywhere. I discovered a long time ago that if you don't put out your intentions with clarity, the universe doesn't know what to give you. So that's how I start the day. And since my day pretty much is spent in service to others, I feel very blessed that I have the opportunity to pay it forward. I also have 2 daughters and 2 stepsons. They all have spouses and children. So my life is very, very full, very big, and very blessed. And I stay focused on that. And to that point, when I journal in the evening, it's not only about gratitude, but it's about where I felt safe that day. Because for so long, I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe in the world around me, and I didn't feel safe in my body because I didn't trust my body. I didn't trust my body to take care of me. And when I didn't trust my body, there was no way I could love my body. And I don't mean loving how it looks. You know, we can't love what we don't trust, and we'll never trust what we don't love. So I journal on where I feel safe, where I felt safe that day. And, you know, talking about loving my body, trust me, at 66 years old, there are plenty of things that I don't love, but I honor it and I respect it. And I thank it for where it's gotten me today. Just the fact that I survived what I survived makes me very grateful. And every tragedy, every trauma turned out to be a lesson for me. Because if I hadn't experienced all I had experienced, the good, bad, and the ugly, I wouldn't be able to have turned it into a passion or a purpose. And I'm very grateful for that.
Well, you certainly don't look your age. I mean, I'm 56, you're 66, and you do not look 66, at least what I would think. So you're doing something really, really well.
Well, you know, we have to change that. We have to change our image of what we imagine aging is all about. I always say, I hate the expression anti-aging. There should be nothing anti about it. We should embrace aging. If you think back, right, hundreds of years ago, the older women were the wise women. They were respected. They were honored. They weren't put out to pasture or expected to wither away.
Oh, I love that you said that. That's true, right? Because we have accumulated the knowledge, the experience, the lessons that we've learned. That's cool. That's fun to think about. I was excited today. I was at the gym and we were working on squats, and there's a girl that's 20 years younger than me that was in my class, and I squatted 10 pounds more than her.
Okay.
And she's the one who brought it up to me today. Cause like we were in the same sorority in college, and we just were talking, you know, we talk all the time. And she said, I just want you to know, cause I was commenting how strong she is. She's like, well, you squatted more than me today, cause we were doing a certain routine. And I was like, really cool. So my whole thing is just being strong and empowering, because I believe strong physically helps with strong emotionally and mentally, you know? So, so you journal in the morning and in the evening. Is there anything else? Like if you were to offer the listeners a few tips just on things that they can apply to their lives today, like what would that look like for you?
Well, it starts with sleep. Sleep is a non-negotiable. How are you sleeping? Do your sleep habits need to be looked at? That's very, very important. How are your relationships? Do you feel connected? Do you feel safe? What can you let go of that is no longer serving you? You know, something that's a very important point that I bring up all the time to my clients is that transformation is less about what we do to change and more about what we let go of in an effort to be the change. So I would suggest to our listeners that they really think about that. What is it that they can let go of today that is no longer serving them, that is keeping them from tasting the abundance that's in their life right now? So it's sleep, it's connections, connection to yourself. It's thinking about what you're putting into your body. You know, are you eating food or are you eating products? Are you taking time to chew your food well? Think about the taste, the temperature, the texture, and just think about how everything you're putting in your body is inviting your body to thrive. Or is it? That's where you have a choice. Are you self-soothing or are you self-sabotaging? Now, there's nothing wrong with self-soothing. We need to self-soothe. Every human being needs to self-soothe. Think about it. A baby sucks a pacifier or, has a lovey. I always say my grandson had a blankie that with his fingers, he made a hole in it.
Oh,
There's
cute.
nothing wrong with self-soothing, right? But is your self-soothing sabotaging you so that it's leading to self-destruction? These are all questions to ask yourself. Get curious, invite an awareness, and then think about what you can let go of in order to be the change you want to see. And I know I'm talking generalizations, and I'm doing it on purpose because everybody's story is different. Everyone has something unique to them that they can let go of. We all have attachment to our story. How is that serving you? That's a good question to ask. What can you turn the page on? Because your story will always be your story. You can't get rid of it, but you can turn the page on it and start writing what can become your happily ever after.
Oh, you should write a book, Mindy.
I did. I did.
Oh, you did. Let's talk about it. What's the book called?
Yeah, the book is called The Freedom Promise. 7 steps to stop fearing what food will do to you and start embracing what it can do for you. It's available on Amazon, and it details every one of the 7 steps I described earlier. But every chapter, every step starts with an anecdotal story of my own insanity. And it has action steps, it has journal questions, pages for you to write your answers in. And it serves to be part memoir, part self-help, and from what I've been told, it's extremely inspirational.
Wow, that's so fabulous. I'm so happy for you. When did you put it out? When did you release it?
2014. So it was before I embarked on my certification in functional medicine nutrition. So it's really more of a spiritual journey, it delves more into the eating psychology piece of my practice, more so than the functional medicine nutrition practice. Today, when I work with clients, not only do I delve into that piece and the 7 steps, but we also do a lot of work on gut health, hormone health, and resetting one's nervous system, because the women that I work with tend to need attention in those areas.
Resetting one's nervous system. What does that look like?
Oh, well, it looks like looking at the stress and resilience piece of how we style our lives, looking at neurotransmitter activity, brain chemistry. Maybe there are deficiencies there that can be easily corrected with amino acids. It's looking at the polyvagal theory. How is the vagus nerve activated or deactivated? It's understanding the difference between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, the rest and digest, rest and heal, parasympathetic, versus the fight, flight, or freeze, sympathetic, and introducing tools to find yourself really in that rest and digest mode. And that really sets the stage to be able to receive everything else. But nothing is accomplished without healing the gut. All healing starts in the gut.
Okay. So what are your favorite tips for working on your gut health?
Eliminating inflammatory foods, but also eliminating inflammatory and toxic beliefs, because those will impact our digestion, which is going to impact gut health. So many functional practitioners start with what they call an elimination diet. So it's eliminating, in most cases, gluten, dairy, and sugar, refined sugar, because those are the most common inflammatory foods. But it's very hard to do that when you have a relationship with food that is dependent on and reflected in your relationship to your story and yourself. So I like to start with the elimination diet that deals with the thoughts and the beliefs.
Mm.
So we start there. So, but if somebody is struggling with digestive symptoms that are really calling for attention, then we'll look at diet. But I always have my clients to start before I take away any foods or suggest swaps, because I never take away anything without replacing it with something else. I have them track and log and start paying attention to how what they're eating makes them feel physically as well as emotionally. That's putting them in touch with the wisdom of their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So
For
really,
sure.
that's where we start.
Because like we said earlier, one food can be really healthy and healing to a person, and then another person eats that same food, and then they get all kinds of, GI distress from that. So, I just got a Biome Test. Have you heard of them?
Absolutely, sure.
I just got a new one of those, and so I've been reading the report to try to comprehend certain things. And like, the limit foods, how they say your superfoods, your avoid foods, and then your limit foods. I'm thinking, well, what if I didn't eat those limit foods at all? Would that speed up my recovery process? So.
Yeah, it's really a good idea to avoid, you can't do it all at once. So you might want to start with just the avoidance foods.
Well, I've been doing this for a while, so for me, it's not a big deal. The avoiding foods is the easy part. It's the limit foods that walking that fine line. Like, for instance, I make my own homemade yogurt with grass-fed half and half. And it's that wheat belly yogurt, like you ferment it for 36 hours. And it's really supposed to be good for your gut. And I've been trying to make it non-dairy. And every time I do it, it turns out horrible. So then I have to make another batch, the dairy. But like, that's pretty much the only dairy that I'm letting myself have, even though the thing will say, oh, I can have an ounce of this and an ounce of this and half a cup of that. It's just, I don't know. To me, gut health is key, but it's like figuring out how to get everything it needs is a challenge, in my opinion.
Right. But that's why it's a good idea to go slow, right? And that's why it's so nuanced and bio-individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Indeed.
So to, just make a blanket statement to a client or a patient that about eat this, don't eat that is really not fair.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite foods?
Oh my, well, I love greens. I do eat fish. I say that I eat, I guess you would say I'm a pescatarian, but I eat primarily plant-based. I eat primarily plant-based, and I'm very, very happy with that. I start my day with a smoothie with some sort of dairy alternative as the base. And I use a gut rebuild powder that I get from my functional medicine practice that I employ for my own health. And in it, I add all kinds of supplements to heal my gut, because my gut is a mess from the years of laxative abuse and the other abuse I heaped on it. What else do I put in it? Some fruit, some vegetables. And then lunch could be anything depending on my schedule. Sometimes I'll have another smoothie, but sometimes I'll make myself an omelet or a salad. Usually lunch is whatever's hanging around, just because I don't have time or the inclination to stop and prepare something for myself. And then dinner is usually fish or a salad and some sort of acceptable for me protein.
What part of New York do you live in?
Right outside of the city.
Okay, so my oldest son lives in the East Village, and I know you guys got smacked this last week with weather.
Mhm.
And one thing that I learned from Chinese medicine is that when you're in cold weather, it's better to eat warming foods. So I make a big pot of vegetable soup, just throw in whatever's in the garden and just make a big, like that just is the best, like using kale and just everything that we have.
That's what I had yesterday. I make a huge pot of soup with everything that I can find. And then what I do is after the soup is done, the vegetables are all cooked down. I take half of them out. I use my immersion blender to make it really thick. I put the chunky vegetables back, and then I add shiitake mushrooms, kale, and chickpeas. And it is just a fabulous meal. Fabulous meal.
You don't cook the kale?
Well, I put it back in the soup so it cooks down.
Oh, okay.
But I add it after because I don't want to blend it. I don't want it with the immersion blender. So after I blend what I blend, which is usually red pepper and carrots and cauliflower and yellow and green zucchini. I throw in a can of fire roasted tomatoes, butternut squash. So it's this gorgeous, gorgeous orange soup. Then I add what I don't want to blend because I want the kale in there whole, and I want the chickpeas, and I want the mushrooms.
Yeah, you want the texture.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I like that idea. It's like a bisque with some chunky stuff in it. That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love.
And then I make a chili that I love. In fact, this recipe, I call it "Who Would Have Thunk It Chili?" And I love telling this story. In fact, the recipe is in my book, and I tell this story. It's in my Eat Mindfully chapter. Years and years ago, I found a recipe for vegetarian chili, and it was gorgeous. And the recipe sat on my counter for months. But chili was a food that I was afraid of. You know, beans, they're so high in carbs and they're fattening. And, you know, that was my anorexic brain. So now here I am, you know, years into recovery, and I'm going to make this soup. So I go to Whole Foods and I buy everything that I need to buy. And I come home and I set out to make this soup. And I'm adding ingredients. And I even decided I needed an extra can of beans, and I'm stirring and I'm tasting and I'm stirring and I'm tasting. And it was so delicious. And then it dawned on me that I hadn't given one thought to what this heaping pot of deliciousness was going to do to my body. It was the greatest awakening. It was such an epiphany, such an aha moment for me that I adapted the recipe and I renamed it "Who Would Have Thunk It Chili?" Because years ago, who would have thunk that I would ever be eating a bowl of chili as a meal?
Wow, that's fabulous. Good for you. That's freedom. Ha.
So
No
that's how
pun
I like to
intended.
eat. That's how I like to eat. That's my favorite kind of food.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, Mindy, where can our listeners find you?
thefreedompromise.com. I have lots of free resources there. I have a guide, which is a detailed guide to food freedom, which really details my 7 steps. I have a masterclass. I have a free mini course. Of course, I have a newsletter. I'd love to have you subscribe to my newsletter, Mindy, thefreedompromise.com/newsletter. It's all there under freebies. Instagram @thefreedompromise. And I have a Facebook group, Stop Fearing Food, The Freedom Promise Way. Love to have you join me there. Once a month, I offer the opportunity to ask me anything. So in order to get that invitation and that Zoom link, you need to be a member of either my Facebook group or a subscriber to my newsletter. And I would love to hear from you. And thank you, Tracy, for asking me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to go subscribe to your newsletter right now. And I recommend everybody else do the same. You are absolutely lovely. And I loved meeting you and hearing your entire story. And I'm sure you've done amazing things helping women across the world, across the country. So I honor you for that, Mindy.
Well, it's my passion. I feel so strongly about changing the conversation about disordered eating, eating disorder recovery. I believe that we need to honor our bodies, approach it one meal at a time, and stop fearing what food will do to us and start embracing what it can do for us.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I enjoyed speaking with you, and I wish you nothing but a wonderful day.
Same to you, Tracy. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing as well.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much for listening to this awesome lady. Please check her out at thefreedompromise.com. If you know anyone who could benefit from her coaching practice, please share this episode with them, as this is something we don't want to mess with. All right, well, thank you so much for listening. Make it a great day. See you next week. This podcast contains the opinion and thoughts of its host and guests. It is intended to provide helpful and informative material on the subjects covered. All statements made on the podcast have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. If the listener requires professional assistance or advice, please contact your personal medical doctor. Both host and guest specifically disclaim any responsibility for any liability, loss, or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence directly or indirectly of the use and application of any of the contents of these episodes. Like I said, this is my opinion and I could be wrong.